Right, so I want to make a video updating everyone as usual, as well as get into some other important things. Now, the first thing I want to mention too is that uh, arguably one of the biggest stories that has came out since this whole situation started just was released this morning. So I'm going to talk about that in a few minutes, so stay tuned for that. But for starters, I just want to talk about the new case totals. In Canada, we're up to 50,688 confirmed cases with 2,911 dead. Alberta, 5,165 cases, 87 dead. 315 new cases yesterday, but we continue to test massive amounts of people. I think yesterday we were around 137,000 tested. So we tested almost, what, 7,000 people yesterday. So of the people being, again, we continue to ramp up our test rate. So obviously the amount of confirmed cases is going to go up. Not to mention too, we're having about, I don't know, 100-ish people a day recover. And again, that's just the people that obviously we know for sure. Again, we still don't even have 100 people dead in the province yet. So, like I say, apparently I heard the rumor, I'm not sure if it's confirmed yet, that Alberta is coming out with its reopening plan uh, today or tomorrow. So we'll see about that. Um, we'll see. I'm not sure. My guess is that they'll be very reluctant, which I completely disagree with. But at the very least, if we can get something, because again, we're at the point where the lockdown clearly isn't preventing any of the case total. Like the correlation between the lockdown and a drop in cases doesn't really seem to exist anywhere really for that matter. The numbers in Canada have been steady for the last couple weeks, but for the first couple weeks of the lock or the first few weeks of the lockdown, I mean, obviously it takes a good week or two for the upwards of 2 week incubation period, but there isn't much of a correlation between the lockdown and a drop in cases. So again, that's just more evidence. But Alberta updated its modeling, so I wanted to talk a little bit about that. Again, you look at Edmonton, and the curve is very flat for Edmonton. I mean, it's been very flat since about, the start of it, first week of April. It's Calgary we have to worry about, and it should be specific areas that we worry about. Not only that, most of the outbreaks in Calgary, I mean, most of the dead is from the one nursing home. I think about 30 of the deaths are from one nursing home. Again, we've still had like only 80 people die. And then we had about, what, 600 cases from the one meat packing plant. So this isn't a widespread disease or virus or any of that kind of stuff. And again, we still have just 82 people in the hospital for this and just 21 in the ICU. So only what, 20, maybe 30 people actually have their lives, in danger for this. So um, that's something that, again, this isn't the doomsday virus. If this was the doomsday, and again, we're talking less than 100 people. I mean, there's probably hospitals in Edmonton and Calgary that could literally take on this entire load of people, let alone the several hospitals in both Edmonton and Calgary, let alone Red Deer, all the other big cities. So again, this whole, oh, we're gonna have, hospitals overwhelmed if we don't keep things shut down is just not true. I mean, it's not true. Even in Calgary, look, I mean, Calgary's been hit way harder than most everywhere else in pretty much North America, and I've yet to see a report to where they're showing, oh, our hospitals are completely overwhelmed. Like, again, it's not very telling. Here is the testing. Again, the average testing that so far has been 2,329, and we're like double that. So we're testing a lot more people than we were off the start, which is definitely partially responsible for the increase in cases. This is some other stuff here. So here is the projections, and again, we're still well under the low end is this white line at the bottom here, and we're still well below that. We're well much lower than the low end of the prediction. So again, if we're well below the low end of the prediction, then what are we doing here? Like, what are we doing? This doesn't make any sense whatsoever. Like, whatsoever. And again, if I told you that at the start of this, if I went and told people that, hey, we're going to find out, 6 weeks from now that the death rate is less than 10 times, maybe even upwards of 20 times, maybe even more. It seems like the more evidence that comes out, the lower the death rate gets. Um, if the death rate's going to be, let's just say, 15 times lower than we think it is right now, would you support a lockdown? I don't see how anybody could look at you, with that can think critically and look at you with a straight face and be like, yeah, we should keep things locked down. It doesn't make any sense. So getting into the really big story here, so uh, James O'Keefe, Project Veritas, released a video this morning about funeral directors saying that people that are dying are listed as dying from the virus when they aren't actually dying from the virus. Now, this is something that's been rumored for a while now, but it hasn't really been confirmed. I mean, you had Pennsylvania, who removed, I think, 200 people from their death count, and like, again, we didn't think it was at least as widespread, but this is just confirmation that, hey, the death rate is going to be even lower than it already is. We're talking, by the end of this, we're probably talking that healthy people under 60 years old are looking at 1 in 10,000. I mean, now it's about 1 in 1,000. I bet you by the end of this, it'll be 1 in 10,000, maybe even less. And when I first started saying that, oh, we probably never even should have locked down in the first place, I was somewhat reluctant to say that. Again, I'm always skeptical about saying stuff like that. But now I think we're at the point to where I think it's very clear that we never even should have locked down in the first place. So, it's like I mentioned that, um, we're still having this debate about how to go about reopening when the evidence is blatantly obvious, and I don't say this reluctantly, blatantly obvious that we never even should have locked down in the first place. Now, we should have locked down nursing homes, we should have locked down the borders, stuff like that would have drastically, even if we would have just closed off our borders from flights from China and anybody coming in from any place where there's a least bit of an outbreak, I think that if we would have kept things open, or at least kept the economy open and just quarantined the old and the immunocompromised, I think we would have had less cases than we do right now, because the outbreaks are largely because we allowed foreigners, and some of them from America too, it's fair to say, but we allowed people to come in when we shouldn't have. So that's something that, like I say too, that, and the big thing that I want to point out from this is that what's going to happen in society when people find out. Now, it may not happen because the mainstream media will cover for them and the government will accuse anyone who has the idea of being a conspiracy theorist. But what's going to happen when people realize that we completely destroyed our economy for absolutely no reason? Like, it's one thing to be like, hey, we destroyed our economy, but we saved thousands of lives, which theoretically we did. But the problem is, okay, maybe we saved 1,000 lives, but we we killed we're going to kill more people from the economic collapse. And I think the amount of depression, the amount of people completely losing everything is going to be infinite amount of times worse. Not only that, we're going to have, the UN has already warned of, these third world countries, there's going to be food shortages, which means people dying of starvation. Malnutrition is going to get even worse, which it already is bad in a lot of these countries. I mean, I've seen stuff like that firsthand, and it's something that, like, let's say, what's going to happen to society when people realize that all of this was completely unnecessary, that we completely shut down our economy for something where the death rate is comparable to the flu. And again, in 2018 I think it was 2018, the states had 80,000 people, roughly, again, you don't know exactly, die from the flu. They have still yet to hit that number, and I think there's still 10, 20,000 people away from that. So, and not only that, too, the numbers are clearly inflated, and this stuff like this shows that what's going to happen when people realize that we completely destroyed our economy, brought on, how many people have depression right now, How many people are abusing their kids, abusing their spouses, all that kind of stuff? And again, how much pain and suffering is going to come from that abuse too? Like you have a kid who gets abused as a kid, they face that the rest of their life. Again, so the amount of, like I say, the amount of pain and suffering that's going to come from keeping things closed down is literally going to be hundreds of times, if not thousands of times worse than the very small amount of old people that are dying from this. And not only that, a lot of them aren't even dying from this. So, like I say, this is something, and again, the thing I'll point out here is go check out the video, go watch it for yourself, take it for what you will. Again, I don't want you to just take my word for everything. Go watch the video. Just search, it's here. You go look at James O'Keefe or Project Veritas on Twitter. You'll be able to go, it'll give you the link to the video. If you search it on YouTube, you may not get it because YouTube likes censoring this kind of stuff. But again, go check it out. Take it for what you will. But it's very obvious that people who run these funeral homes are saying we're being coerced, we're being, people are being marked as dying from COVID when they're not actually dying from it. And it's, like I say, the death rate is obviously even lower than the numbers already show. So I'm not going to talk too much more about this, but again, I can't stress the importance of a story like this. I really can't. This story is from Newsweek, and it's titled "Most U.S. Hospitals Are Empty. Soon they might be closed for good." I don't want to go through the whole article here, but I mean, you can read it if you want. And again, like, this isn't the doomsday virus. The whole point of closing the economy in the first place was entirely based off the idea that if we don't, hospitals will be overwhelmed, and we'll face, not only will hospitals be overwhelmed, but there'll be, other, a domino effect basically. And it's something that's not happening. Not only that, the opposite is happening. Hospitals aren't even as busy as they normally are in almost every area, even New York. Like I say, even New York, I've seen stories of doctors saying, "Hey, we should reopen. This isn't that bad. This isn't that bad." So yeah, so this is something that, like I say, I know I'm repeating myself a lot, but if I'm going to repeat myself about anything, it should be something that literally affects millions of people, just in Canada alone, maybe even tens of millions of people. And not only that, it affects people's livelihoods, it affects people's savings, it affects literally every aspect. Um, so the last thing I wanted to talk about here is from Spencer Fernando. And he goes on to say, "We have leaders who are reluctant to impose travel restrictions on foreign nationals as the virus spreads, while seeming almost eager to impose immense restrictions on their own fellow citizens. Very disturbing. How does such a messed up mentality take hold?" And this is what we have in Canada too. That Canada is one of the saddest states of affairs of pretty much any, at least first world country in the world. And it's like I always mention too, the only difference between Canada and a openly, authoritarian, dictatorship kind of country is that we at least pretend, or we pretend that we're still a free country. And we're really not. We're really not. We don't have free speech. We don't have the right to assemble. We don't, again, show me a right that we have that the courts are actually upholding, a major right. I can't think of anything. I can't think of anything. Like, we have a government that wants to censor social media posts. They want to ban guns with literally no evidence to back up their, ideas. Again, they want to ban free speech. So again, like I said, Canada is such a sad state of affairs. It's not even funny. And I think, like I say, I think that we're going to be in for some really, really tough times going forward. And the thing that bothers me most is we have the majority of the population that's completely asleep at the wheel. Like, you have these people that are just going along, like, hey, the government's, they're, I'm on unemployment insurance, things are going to be fine after this. Well, again, the people are just economically illiterate. Like I say, trying to talk to people about basic economics is like trying to talk to someone in a language that they've literally never heard before. Like that's what it feels like. And again, I'm not an expert by any means. I mean, I've taken economics courses at the college level, but I'm not an expert. I don't claim to be. But talking to the average person, like I say, it's like talking to someone in a language they've literally never heard before. That's what it feels like. And like I say, I don't know what else to really to say with this kind of stuff, but we have a government where their priorities are clearly backwards. They clearly have nefarious intentions, and I don't understand where the hiccup is with so many people just going along like it's no big deal, guys. We're only headed down an authoritarian communist trail. Like, what's the worst that could happen? It's not like none of that kind of stuff has happened recently. It's not like the Nazis or the Soviet Russia or communist China. It's not like any of those kind of examples exist. Oh wait, communist China still exists. Most people remember alive today. I mean, I don't, but most people remember Soviet Russia. I mean, not most people, but everybody knows about the Nazis and all this kind of stuff. And I think that we're gonna down the road in history, you know like we look back and think, hey, how did this kind of crap happen in history? Like, how did the Nazis even exist? Like, how did they, you know what made people go along with that? Like, because a lot of people went along with it. And we're going to look back in history and be like, 500 years, not maybe not that long, 100, 200 years down the road, and be like, hey, you guys made fun of them for going along and getting along, and allowing such terrible stuff to go along. Take the Nazis for example, or terrible stuff to go on. You guys had the internet. You guys had cell phones. You guys had social media, and you allowed just as bad as stuff to go on. Like, I mean, like I say, China has millions of people in internment camps. They take their organs, sell them on the black market, keep the money for themselves, and yet nobody cares. Nobody cares. Why? And it's very simple that these kind of people are either so ignorant that they literally have no idea whatsoever about what's going on, or they're communist sympathizers or flat out communists. Most of the time, they're just flat out communists. It's the how the old saying goes is that progressives or socialists, progressives and socialists, they want communism now. Liberals or Democrats, they want socialism and communism eventually. That's basically how it goes too. And a lot of these people, I mean, a lot of the people don't understand, but their policies inevitably lead to this kind of stuff. Like, it inevitably leads to socialism, to communism. Tens of millions of people, maybe even hundreds of millions of people die, and the cycle starts all over again because we don't learn from history. But anyway, I'm going to leave the video there. If you liked it, make sure to hit that like and subscribe. Check out my PayPal and email. I got linked in the description. I appreciate any donations, but at the very least, just hit that like and subscribe if you haven't already. And the very last thing, as always, check out my BitChute channel as well. I'm starting to grow there a little bit, so check me out there as well.